All right, it is week 6 of the 2024 NFL season. The quest to do a video collaboration for every game on the 2024 Cleveland Browns schedule continues as we go 6 for 6 right now. So, Cincinnati, you've got a lot of pressure coming up next week to help me go 7 for 7. But we're not talking about the Bengals right now because it is Philadelphia week. And something must be special about Philadelphia because I don't have one video collaboration for this Eagles game. I've got two. And number one is going down right now. I've got my friend Brandon Lewis with me from the Brandon's World podcast. We do Championship Rings live every Tuesday at 6 p.m. over on the Championship Rings YouTube channel. But today, you are here representing the Philadelphia Eagles. You have been a long-time Eagles fan, pretty much since you were a kid, right?
Yeah, so I don't know if we're gonna get into this or not. But at some point, I'm sure tonight I will tell you the story about how I became a Philadelphia Eagles fan. Welcome to everybody who's used to listening to me over on Championship Rings. I am repping my Cleveland Guardians tonight. We just lost Game 3 of the ALDS, unfortunately, to the Detroit Tigers. So got to rep my Guards gear, but all Eagles first. Let's go! Excited for this weekend.
So I'm assuming you're going to be wearing all your Eagles stuff on Sunday when this game goes down?
I am weird in the fact that I don't typically wear my game day gear during game day. Um, I'm mostly in nice, comfy, relaxing pajamas, and just lounge gear, and then I mostly wear my sports gear during the week.
Okay. By the way, I do have a bit of Eagles memorabilia. I got that little Eagles
There
helmet
you
right
go.
there. And I got that. By the way, I think the Eagles have one of the best helmets in the NFL. I love the simple just wing with the green
As,
helmet. It
as a
is
matter of fact, right here by my desk, I don't know if you guys can see this. I have this is not a replica helmet, this is a toy version helmet, but
Oh, are you putting it
there you
on?
go.
That's awesome. Um yes. Um I I'm not going to this game, but from what I've heard, if I were to wear Cleveland Browns stuff at Lincoln Financial Field on Sunday, I would pretty much get killed. So, because Eagles fans do not like opposing teams' fans in their stadium. So, I don't know if that's fully true or not. But anyway, we've got the Eagles taking on the Browns. Eagles are coming off of their bye week. Meanwhile, the Browns are coming off of absolutely getting wrecked in our nation's capital by Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders to the tune of 34-13. Deshaun Watson got sacked 7 times. And I can't even call it what that was, a football game last week. It was bad, to say the least. Um, I think your screen might be frozen over there, Brandon. Yep, his screen is frozen, so hopefully he'll be back in a minute. But in the meantime, yeah, I I don't even know what to make of last Sunday's game, to be honest with you. I really don't. Um, it was just bad all around. Let me see what the story is with him. Um, hold on 1 second. Okay. All right. Did we fix it?
I believe so. Your internet was crashed on my end, so I don't know what happened. Mine was fine.
Huh. Your your screen was completely frozen, but I was just talking about that disastrous game last week in Washington. I don't even know what that was. to be honest with you. But
Yeah, that was yeah, I don't know. The Browns were unprepared. They were poorly coached. Just some boneheaded decisions. Deshaun Watson struggling very much in the pocket. And as I've been telling you on championship rings ever since we made our NFL predictions in August, I told you I thought the Washington Commanders were going to be a better team than the Dallas Cowboys. I had them going 9-8 and being a wild card. And now I'm sitting here saying if Philadelphia loses this game, Washington is easily in the driver's seat to win the NFC East.
oh, trust me, Philadelphia. If last game was any indication, I know Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni have been having some issues recently. Like they've been talking about it. Jalen Hurts is gonna have himself a field day on Sunday against this defense. I
Hey,
know a
listen,
uh,
every Browns fan has said that. I'm here to tell you this year in the NFL, more than any other, it's a week to week league. I would not be so sure if this was not a close game.
watch AJ Brown is gonna magically be healed and he'll be fine and ready to go because he's gonna see the Browns defense and be like, "Oh, I get to go up against them. Yes, I'll be out on the field on Sunday."
Well, that is the case. AJ Brown is going to be a full go. Devontae Smith is going to be a full go, and Lane Johnson's going to be a full go.
Yep, Browns are gonna get thrashed on Sunday against this Eagles team. So the last time we played each other was here in Cleveland back in 2020 during the COVID year, and the Browns won, which snapped, I believe it was a 5-game losing streak to the Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia has basically owned this series. I can look up the history now, in fact.
Yeah,
But
I was at that game in 2020. That was the only time I got to see Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson play live. That was a miserable game in the rain. I believe the Browns won by 6 in that game. Carson Wentz had 4 interceptions, I believe. It's just absolutely miserable. That was the year, obviously, Philadelphia went 4-11-1. Doug Peterson got fired. Browns made the playoffs that year and won a playoff game, Baker Mayfield against Pittsburgh.
yes, the Browns won that game 22-17. Prior to that, Philadelphia won in 2016, 29-10. In 2012, it was 17-16. That was the year Mike Vick threw the game-winning touchdown pass.
That was week 1. That was Brandon Whedon and Trent Richardson's debut. I was at that game as well.
In 2008, Philadelphia crushed Cleveland 30-10.
That was a Monday night game.
Yes, 2004, Philadelphia won in overtime 34-31. And then in 2000, the Eagles won 35-24. Prior to 2020, the last time the Browns beat the Eagles, 1994.
Was that in Philly?
Yes.
Okay, so they've not won in Philly in 30 years.
Yes. So, which is understandable. I mean, Philly is, I got to admit, when I look around the league, Philly has one of the best home field advantages in the NFL, without a doubt. Like, Philly has some of the most passionate fans in the league, no doubt. They will let you know one way or another how they feel about you.
Yeah, I've always said, obviously, living in Cleveland, but being an Eagles fan, that for an Eagles fan, going 7-9 is hell, and for a Browns fan, it's a victory parade.
Yeah, I mean, hell, prior to the start of this season, I thought the Browns could go 9-8 and possibly steal a wild card spot in the AFC. And then after the first couple losses to the Cowboys and the Giants, I'm like, okay, I'll change my prediction to 6-11. Now I think 6-11 is being a little generous, and now I'm thinking closer to like 5-12 or 4-13, something like that. Because
this game means a lot to both teams because if Philadelphia does lose this game, there's a very real possibility that head coach Nick Sirianni, who's a Mount Union grad, by the way, obviously in the Ohio area, there is a real possibility that Nick Sirianni will not have a job on Monday. Consequently, for your Cleveland Browns, if they lose this game and they lose to Cincinnati next week, who they have historically done well against, Cincinnati, those 1-4, they're a desperate football team. If they lose these next two games, them being the Browns, and fall to 1-6, you can pack up shop and start looking forward to April 2025 for the NFL draft.
Yes. By the way, even if the Browns have a bad season this year, which it looks like they're going to, they should not fire Kevin Stefanski. He's a two-time coach of the year. He's gotten them to the playoffs twice. I know he wasn't there for the wild card round win in 2020, but he was still part of it. He got us to the playoffs last season with Joe Flacco, PJ Walker, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and that whole shit show. So, no, I would not fire Kevin Stefanski. I haven't heard a lot of talk about that because of how this season has gone, but I'm just putting that out there now.
I think if this season goes as bad as it possibly could be, I mean, Josh, I'm here to tell you, I don't think the Browns are going to go 1-16, but it's on the table. They don't have a for sure winnable game the rest of their way on the schedule. And so for me, everything's on the table. Deshaun Watson, do you want to eat that dead cap in? Because they're not going to suspend him. Basically, the NFL came out and pretty much said there's no merit to this lawsuit that was just filed against Watson prior to the Jacksonville game. So they're not going to be able to cut Watson for nothing. But Kevin Stefanski's firing is on the table. Andrew Berry, the general manager, who did come from Philadelphia, his firing is on the table. To me, you have the most expensive and arguably the worst contract in the history of sports. And 1-16 or whatever it's going to end up being, 4-13, 5-12, heads are going to roll.
Oh yeah, I agree with you about. And I'll tell you what, you look at the Philadelphia Eagles. I understand you've had a bit of a coaching carousel recently, but for the most part, the Eagles have been more of a stable franchise. You know, your owner, Jeffrey Lurie, basically lets Howie Roseman do his thing. That's why you have such a stacked defense, for example, because you allowed him to just
I would say a stacked offense, not necessarily a stacked defense. We'll get into the defense. We get into the nuts and crannies of the game. They did make a change in the secondary. But I would say the offense is definitely way more stacked than the defense.
Sure. But you can't just dismiss the defensive line when you've got Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith.
I can when Bryce Huff has started 5 games this year and is not registered on the stat sheet this season. That was the swing and miss by Howie Roseman, replacing Hassan Reddick with Bryce Huff. Brandon Graham has done good. He stepped up. Josh Sweat needs to step up more. I think the key to this game, specifically against Cleveland, will be really for the Browns and the Eagles. Will Jalen Carter be able to dominate the interior of that Browns offensive line?
I would think so, because the Browns offensive line, it feels like it's been a rotating door in terms of allowing defensive lines to just go after Deshaun Watson. I mean, go back a few weeks and look at what the Giants did, on the road in Cleveland.
Yeah, well, we talked about it at the time on Championship Rings. The strength of the Giants defense is their defensive line. Philadelphia also, for the record, by the way, cut Devin White this week. He wasn't getting any playing time. Did not play a snap at all for Philadelphia this season. It's the Zach Bond, Nakobe Dean show there. Nakobe Dean, a Georgia guy. Jalen Carter, Georgia guy. Jordan Davis, Georgia guy. Those are the 3 guys, in my opinion, that are going to anchor this defense. And if they can get pressure the way I know they're capable of, the way they did against Derek Carr week 3 against New Orleans, coming off a bye, yes, the recipe is there for a get-right game for Philadelphia. What Eagles fans need to see now is the execution.
Yeah. You talked about your offense. I mean, look at all the weapons you got. You signed Saquon Barkley this offseason. You got A.J. Brown, who I really liked coming out of the draft. I was very high on him. You got Devontae Smith, Heisman Trophy winner, another wide receiver I was very high on. Dallas Goedert. I mean, Jalen Hurts has all the weapons at his disposal, but that's where the question mark is for me. Will the real Jalen Hurts please stand up? Which version of Jalen Hurts are we going to get? Is it the Jalen Hurts that led the Eagles to a couple minutes away from knocking off the Chiefs in the Super Bowl just a couple years ago? Or is it the version of Jalen Hurts that we saw last season? I don't know.
Well,
Like,
Josh, and this year, I know the interceptions, but really over the last couple of weeks, it hasn't been the interceptions; it's been the fumbles. Really, in that Tampa game, they got blitzed in that game against Tampa Bay. They were down 24-0 before they could even blink, but they get back in the game. It's 24-14. They're driving down midway for the third quarter. Jalen Hurts doesn't feel the pressure up the middle of the pocket, gets stripped, and for all intents and purposes, at that point, the comeback is over because Tampa goes right down the field. So that to me is going to be the key. Can Jalen Hurts play on time, get the football out, and don't turn the football over and hold on to the football? Because Jim Schwartz, former defensive coordinator for Philadelphia, when they did win the Super Bowl in 2017, loves to play man coverage. He's going to want to blitz, but that also leaves A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith out on an island.
right. And I don't fully trust our secondary because Martin Emerson has not been great. He got torched against Malik Neighbors a couple weeks back. I don't know what Denzel Ward, Grant Delpit, Greg Newsome, I don't know if they're going to be healthy each week because it seems like they're getting injured just about every game at some point. So I'm like, we're going against Devontae Smith. We're going against A.J. Brown. We're going against Dallas Goedert. The Eagles have used Saquon Barkley in the passing game. So I'm not just going to dismiss him out of the equation. So I'm like, how are we supposed to slow down this offensive attack for the Eagles when we couldn't stop basically a one-man wrecking crew in Terry McLaurin last week for Washington?
Well, the key is going to be to get pressure up the middle on Jalen Hurts, and the key is going to come down to your linebacker that wears the number 6, Jeremiah Okusu-Koromoa, JOK. He has to do a better job at tackling. He missed Jaden Daniels one-on-one last week on a fourth down play that Jaden Daniels ran 30 yards down the sideline on, and then he missed Brian Robinson in the hole for his first touchdown of the game when he could have wrapped up. The Browns and the Eagles, I'm a Browns observer. I'm from the Cleveland area. The Eagles have been my favorite team in forever. They are the two worst tackling teams in football. Neither team has done a great job at tackling, and that's what it's really going to come down to.
I'm just like, I look at our defense. We've got Daniel Jones had a great game against us. Oh, Dak Prescott, not so much. But Jaden Daniels did. Gardner Minshew, it was more of the Raiders running backs that really hurt us in that Raiders game. Not so much Gardner Minshew. But Jaden Daniels had a great game against us. So I'm like, how am I supposed to feel going against Jalen Hurts when I saw what he's capable of back in 2022?
And by the way, he had a good game against Green Bay this year. It wasn't for the turnovers. I actually thought the best game he played this year was against Atlanta. If Saquon Barkley catches that ball, Philadelphia gets on out of there with a 2-0 victory, and who knows how the season unfolds from there. So I have seen some signs of better Jalen Hurts this year, though it's not as consistent. Josh, I think if I can, for the Browns defense, it goes back to what I've been telling you on Championship Ring since we've been doing our show for the past year. And it came up again on Sunday, is I know there's a guy who on the back of his jersey, the last name is Garrett, and he wears the number 95. But I'm sorry, I just watch him, and at the games, he's invisible. He does not. I didn't even see him out there on Sunday. He does not impact the game the way Aiden Hutchinson does for Detroit, the way a T.J. Watt does for Pittsburgh. You see these guys in on every pass play or run play. That's just not the case for Myles Garrett. So will 95 show up and make an impact play, or will he do what he seemingly always does, in my opinion, which is gets his one sack in garbage time and calls it a day?
It should be that Miles Garrett is doing what you just talked about, like with TJ Watt, Aiden Hutchinson. I know you disagree with me about Aaron Donald, but he did have that type of impact. I don't think you can disagree with me about that part necessarily,
No,
right?
he had no. I mean, and by the way, I've been saying for us, I think Jalen Carter is this next generation's Aaron Donald. I see it. The guy is getting double teamed and triple teamed every play and still making points.
Right. But I'm just but you understand my point though, like
Yeah, and I mean, and I think you're with me. I think you've been with me. I think on this since day one. You're one of the only people in the Cleveland media that agree with me on this. Myles Garrett is talked about like he's a top two, top three pass rusher in the league, and his stats every year say so. But when you actually watch the games, he doesn't come off your screen. Micah Parsons actually for Dallas, very similar to that, where he'll have a great regular season, and in the postseason, he's been a no-show.
yeah, like I thought bringing in Zadarius Smith would be great because you have Miles Garrett on the one side, Zadarius Smith on the other. One of them is going to get double teamed, which is going to give the other, single coverage and an easier road to sacking the quarterback, or it gives one of the other defensive tackles an easier path to the quarterback. But I just watch him like Miles. I get it. Maybe he's dealing with injuries, but you still should have that same impact where the Eagles offensive line is like, okay, we should have to slide our protection to Miles Garrett's direction. And I just haven't seen that. So no, I'm not disagreeing with you in that regard.
Jordan Malaya, Lane Dickerson, Tim Urges, Mekhi Becton, Lane Johnson. That is the Eagles' offensive line. And Cam Urges, to me, he already has signs of Jason Kelsey. He's had a very good year at the center position. It was a little rocky at first, but he's gotten better with Jalen Hurts since they got that relationship. And Josh, you talked about the Jalen Hurts Nick Sirianni relationship and how that may have affected Hurts. I will say I just saw this right before we jumped on the air here tonight. Jalen Hurts came out today, and for the first time in nearly 2 years, it feels like, publicly defended Nick Sirianni, said that they didn't meet during the bye week, said that they cleaned up whatever ill will, and that he's excited for the future. He did not he did not deflect anything off Nick Sirianni like he's done in the past. He flat out said, I have a great relationship with Coach Sirianni, which is something people in the Philadelphia media were waiting to hear.
So it's interesting that the last statement you made there is what really caught my attention. Not to dismiss the other parts of what you just said, but at the end you said that's what the Philadelphia media was waiting to hear. So, do you think that Jalen Hurts was being genuine when he said all that, or was it more that he was just trying to kind of play to the Philly media, if you will?
I'll be optimistic. I do think that Jalen was genuine. I've said this, and you know this. I like Nick Sirianni. I've said he can't be a horrible coach if he has the best winning percentage in the history of the Philadelphia Eagles for the last 3 years. He got this team to a Super Bowl. The loss of Shane Steichen was bigger than I think we all thought. The loss of Jonathan Gannon was bigger than we all thought. And yes, sometimes coaches are dependent on their coordinators, but I mean, I think it was telling, and I told you this last year in January on Championship Rings when the talk was swirling about Sirianni being fired. The fact that veterans that are now retired, obviously, but veterans in Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelsey vehemently came out and said it is not Nick Sirianni's fault. He should not be fired. And that got in the ear of Jeffrey Lurie, I think, speaks volumes.
And by the way, I'm not trying to advocate that Jalen Hurts is right or that the way the media is perceiving this whole thing is the right way to do it. I'm not 100% sure who's right in this scenario.
Now, what I will guarantee you is, because I know you have another video collaboration with another Eagles content creator, I'm the only person in Philadelphia that likes Nick Sirianni. People want him fired. They think he's cocky. Again, I'm not from the Philadelphia area, so I don't get sort of the Philly hard nose moving off people. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. To me, winners are winners. And I really like a lot of this team. And I think that this team could still be a very special team. There's a lot of people in Philadelphia that don't think so. But again, I'm one of the only few Eagles fans that I would say is optimistic about the future for my football team.
Yeah. And I can understand that. Again, we've talked about it already. You've got the offensive weapons. I think your defense can figure it out. If there's any game for them to really figure it out, it is this game because, yeah, I like Amari Cooper. I like Elijah Moore. I like Jerry Jeudy. I like David Njoku. Um, Nick
Well,
Chubb is
Elijah Moore has been absent pretty much the whole year. I don't know why that is, and they haven't gotten Njoku going. It's Stefanski was so patented for those tight end screens. He's not running it this year. I will tell you, I teased this a little bit earlier in the show. Philadelphia did make a change in the secondary. Avante Maddox is out as the slot corner, and in is second round pick for DeJean. This was rumored to happen during the bye week. DeJean was starting to get more reps. Avante Maddox has not looked good. He's honestly looked like James Bradbury at the end of last year and getting toasted. Cooper DeJean, and then you have Mitchell and Slay, who is still, he's good. He's not as good, I think, as he once was, but he's still a very capable corner. I think that could help the Philadelphia secondary in this particular matchup as well.
and didn't you get the guy from Toledo too? That was so highly.
Yeah, that's Mitchell. That's Quinyon Mitchell. He's on the opposite side of Slay. He starts on the outside.
Okay. Just I thought you had mentioned him, but I wasn't 100% sure. Okay. So it's interesting that you bring up the how much Stefanski likes tight ends and all that. Because if you remember, at the end of last season, when Joe Flacco, hold on, excuse me, when Joe Flacco became our starting quarterback, and I don't even know how all that happened, but nonetheless, when Joe Flacco became our starting quarterback, and Njoku's production went up. Like, he was a big part of the reason they won that game against the Bears late in the season. I'm pretty sure he had a big game late against the Jaguars late in that season. So it is interesting to me how much the offense has changed seemingly from when Joe Flacco was our quarterback to now with Deshaun Watson as our quarterback.
So if you were listening, I don't know how much you could get to listen to the TV copy of the Browns Commanders game, but I thought Greg Olson did a great job breaking down the difference between Stefanski's offense when it's under center, bootleg, play action, 12 personnel, 2 tight end, as opposed to Deshaun Watson, 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, 1 back, 1 tight end, and what it means to run in shotgun versus running under center, and what it means to have to throw more on first down versus running on first down. And he pretty much, to sum it all up, was basically saying that Stefanski's trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and it's not working.
Yeah. But looking at our quarterback situation, think about this for a second. The Browns basically got to the playoffs last season thanks to PJ Walker, Dorian Thompson Robinson, and Joe Flacco. I noticed that I did not say number 4 in that sentence at all. And the reason I include PJ Walker is because he won the game against San Francisco. He won the game against Indianapolis. And then Dorian Thompson Robinson won the game against Pittsburgh, which division games are always important. And then we know Joe Flacco came in and won the games against Jacksonville, Houston, and Chicago, and the Jets. So it's like last season, we made it to the playoffs with basically without Deshaun Watson. You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. But you get my point, though.
Yeah, you know, and again, it's a mess. But and I will say this, Josh, for whatever reason, even without Nick Chubb last year, the Browns were able to run the football. This year, they're not even trying. Deontay Foreman, Jerome Ford, they've completely abandoned the run game.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's because they're trying to mix Ken Dorsey's offense with Kevin Stefanski's offense. But, like, I was talking with a Commanders fan last week, and he said that Dan Quinn, he's not the one calling the defense. It's the defensive coordinator doing it. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're telling me the head coach doesn't have to do the play calling? Like,
When Nick Sirianni doesn't call plays either, obviously that's going more on the offensive side. But I will say this: Ken Dorsey was not a very good play caller as the offensive coordinator of Buffalo. It's the reason why they fired him because it was a bunch of Josh Allen hero ball. Um, I don't think that the firing of Alex Van Pelt as the offensive coordinator was Stefanski's decision either. I have a good source that I will not repeat that it is coming from upstairs and it's not Andrew Berry making that call.
it's the Haslams.
Well, I won't even say that. It is a member of the front office. I'll just leave it at that. And so I'm not gonna write out my source. I'm not gonna repeat it. I'll just say it's not who everybody thinks it is.
But I will say this on the note of the Haslams. I think Kevin Stefanski wants to change bench
Yes,
Deshaun.
absolutely. When he was at the podium after Sunday's game and he got asked the question and he immediately said no, Deshaun's our quarterback, tells you it's not his decision.
Yes.
If he didn't even have to think twice, usually when they ask a question, they kind of pause and they go, "No, that's not in the car." He didn't even pause. He just went, "No, that's not our decision." Next question.
Right.
So, to
Like,
me, that tells me he's not the one making that decision because if he was, I suspect Jameis Winston would have probably started even last week against Washington. He would have at least started this week against Philly.
and that's part of the reason why I think Flacco is no longer a Cleveland Brown and he's an Indianapolis Colt because of the Haslams. They know or they saw how much Cleveland got behind Joe Flacco. And they also knew that Deshaun Watson was going to be back as the starting quarterback. And they're like, well, if Deshaun struggles, we don't want him doing that. And thinking, oh, am I going to get replaced by Flacco if everybody turns on me and starts chanting, we want Flacco. So I think that's why they did it. But even against the Giants, I was at that game. People were starting to chant, we want Winston.
My biggest concern right now for the Browns, I think the locker room's turned on Watson.
Oh, I fully agree with you. Like, you even saw it out on the field. Like, they don't even want him as their starting quarterback.
The offensive line, mainly, which again, part of it, they're banged up, but when Joe Batonio doesn't help you up, that's an issue to me. Joel's the nicest guy there is in the world. That was something nobody talked about. I think it was week 2 or week 3. Deshaun Watson went to get a help up from Joe Batonio, and Joe Batonio dissed him.
I missed that. I wasn't able to watch a live last week's game because I ended up going out on a boat ride with my family. We listened to part of the game, but no, I did not watch a lot of it. I don't think
I'll tell you, the first possession, which I didn't understand the play call when they ran that jet sweep outside to Deontay Foreman on 4th and 1 after they just ran it up the middle with Jerome Ford on 3rd down. When they didn't get that, the game was over. You could just tell the Browns' body language was, we tried.
Yeah. And this is the 3rd game of a 3-game road trip for the
Which
Browns.
is always bad historically for NFL teams if you look at the data.
Yeah. And They come home and start a 3-game homestand following this
Yeah,
game.
it's a very weird scheduling. I don't know why the NFL did it like that. And as I talked about earlier, Josh, you look at this schedule. You still got to play Cincinnati twice. I don't care what their record is. They're putting up points. They just can't stop a nosebleed. I bet you they'll be able to stop Deshaun Watson. You got to play Lamar Jackson, Baltimore twice. Still got to play the Steelers twice. You got to play Jim Harbaugh, in the LA Chargers. You got to play Philly. You got to play,
Denver,
Miami. You got to play Denver in Denver, which will be a hard game. So, I
Kansas
mean,
City.
Kansas City. The Dolphins, just because it's in Cleveland on New Year's Eve and a two is back by that point, maybe you get a cold weather win there. But as I told you, the Giants game was the most winnable game in their schedule. When they lost that game, that's when all hope goes out the window at that point. And then you lose to Vegas, and the clock management by Kevin Stefanski at the end of the game. I told you this on Championship Rings. That was mind numbing. And the fact that, again, this past week against Washington, they had to take 2 timeouts at the goal line to start the second half because they had 12 men on the field, and Deshaun Watson just walked off the field. It's all just a bad look. They look like a poorly coached football team. They look like a football team that's not together. It looks like a football team on the bridge of explosion. If it wasn't for the Carolina Panthers, the Browns would be, well, I don't know, maybe the New York Jets are even more of a disaster now. But the Browns are pretty freaking close.
Yes. I mean, your schedule isn't exactly a walk in the park. I mean, after this, you got to play at the Giants.
That will be a win because Philadelphia owns the Giants. It will be tougher than I thought, but we should win that game.
Then you
At
ha- then you
at
have
Cincinnati's the
yep,
tough one. We should
Jack.
beat Jacksonville at home, which I am now wondering because that's supposed to be a Sunday night game. 2 things. Number one, is Doug Peterson going to be the head coach of the Jaguars for that game? That's obviously the reason why it was on Sunday night. Would they flex that game out of Sunday night if Peterson is still the coach?
Maybe. After that, you got at Dallas. Then you host Washington. Then you're at the Rams, at the Ravens, host the Panthers. That's a win. And then you host the Steelers, at the Commanders, host the Cowboys, and then you host the Giants. That's not exactly a walk in the park schedule for your Eagles.
It's not, but there's a lot of home games in there the back half of the year. Pittsburgh at home is a very winnable game, in my opinion, because we own Pittsburgh at home. We don't do well in Pittsburgh, but we own them historically against Philly. We historically split against Dallas. You would think we'll split against Washington, win at home on a short week, a Thursday night, lose, there later in the season. At Baltimore and at Cincinnati, to me, are our 2 toughest games left.
At Rams could be tough depending on.
You know why I say I don't think that game is tough? I think it's going to be a good game, but Philadelphia has historically owned Sean McVay.
And even though it's going to be on Sunday Night Football, that's basically going to be like an Eagles home game.
Well, you tell me. To me, I think the Rams are going to be out of it. I think the Rams are just that team this year that's too banged up.
So you think that game could also get flexed out of Sunday Night
Yeah,
Football?
I do. I think the Rams are the team this year that's like we have too many injuries. We can't overcome it.
Yeah.
They're in that division. They're on a bye this week. I don't know off the top of my head who they play in week 7, but they're already 1-4. So if they go to 1-5, I know they got Minnesota on a short week in week 8. It could get pretty dicey early for the Rams.
Yeah. But either way, I think that would basically be an Eagles home game because SoFi has basically become a second home for whoever is playing the Rams or the Chargers.
Correct.
But nonetheless, getting back to Browns-Eagles, I mean, we saw how well the Browns did in Seattle last year. I was at that game dealing with the crowd noise and
They should have
stuff.
won that game.
Yeah, they really should have. But they're going to another noisy stadium, so I know it was PJ Walker that started that game, but I wonder if they can take any of that experience dealing with that crowd noise and take it into this game? Am I
You do
am
you
I
want
fit?
do you want a little schedule inkling for this game? Because
Sure.
I know you're big into schedules and home environments and all that. So
Yes.
Philadelphia had obviously their first two games as home games. I'm putting the first two in air quotes because obviously the first game was in Brazil against the Packers. Technically, this is week 6. This is the Eagles' only second home game of the season in 6 weeks, as well as this is outside of the Carolina game in week 14, the only other 1 o'clock home Eagles game this season. So the Eagles are not used to playing 1 o'clock at home. They've historically done well in that spot, though the last time they played 1 o'clock at home was week 17 last year against the Arizona Cardinals.
I don't need to remind you what happened in that game.
Well, there's a guy calling my defense who is now sitting on the sidelines with Bill Belichick making YouTube videos.
um, I didn't realize that's what Matt Patricia's doing now.
Well, he's sitting there with Bill in the parking lot waiting for his next job.
I think Bill's next job is probably gonna be in Dallas, if I had to guess.
See,
But
I'll wait. Okay, I don't want to get off topic, but since you brought it up, I'm gonna throw it at
we
you.
okay, we can talk about it. We can mix in a little championship rings here. I'm cool with that.
You know what I heard? I don't know if you know who Albert Breer is. Albert Breer is a respected national reporter. He's covered the league for a long time, but he used to cover the Patriots. You want to know who has a great relationship with Bill Belichick?
Who?
The owner and founder of AEW, Tony Khan.
Oh,
I think Belichick could be going to Jacksonville.
I I don't know about that fit. Him and Trevor Lawrence?
Bill
Huh.
would get the defense right. For the record, this is why it relates to Philadelphia, because even if we do fire Sirianni, I have told you and I'll say it right here. I want absolutely zero part of do your job, Mr. We're on to the Jets in Philadelphia.
I remember him more so for we're on to Cincinnati. um, but nonetheless, by the way, since you're an Eagles fan, I'll say this. Thank you for taking down the evil empire in Super Bowl 52.
52. That was the greatest. The group. I will say this actually. Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals and World Series were probably the two greatest sports games I've ever seen. I think game 3 of the greatest sports game I ever saw was Super Bowl 52. That is the most entertaining Super Bowl objectively I've ever seen. You can make an argument Super Bowl 57 was number 2, and I was on the wrong side of it, partially because of that damn turf that they made everybody play on in Arizona, and then obviously the holding call on James Bradbury. That still until we win another Super Bowl, that game will stick in the back of my head when I wake up every single morning. I don't kid you. I think about that game constantly when I'm asleep.
Okay, I'll tell you this about that game. Sure, the holding call made a huge difference, but I don't think that's the reason you guys lost that Super Bowl to the Chiefs. The reason I think you guys lost was because of that fumble
Yeah,
earlier in the game.
that was the difference in the game. Who would have thought? No turnovers on either side besides that play. Obviously they don't call the holding call. We have, a minute, minute. I think it would be a minute 30 with one timeout. Jalen Hurts was red hot the whole game. Who knows what would have happened?
Right, exactly. And that harps back to what we were talking about earlier. We got a great version of Jalen Hurts that season. And it could be because there was a disconnect with him and Nick Sirianni. I don't know, but we haven't seen that version of Jalen Hurts
Well,
last
we
season.
saw it for the first half of last year, and then just like the whole team, it fell apart. Um, but again, it goes back to Josh. Coaching in this league matters. Shane Steichen leaves, the offense is not the same. Jonathan Gannon leaves, the offenses or the defense is not the same. We've seen it throughout the NFL. We know how much coaching matters. I want to see what things Vic Fangio does up his sleeve because he's not typically a blitzer. I'm wondering if he does come after QB4 this weekend at Lincoln Financial Field.
If he does, I think he's going to have a great deal of success. And if I'm the Eagles, yes, I'm going to utilize A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, obviously. But I'm just going to say, Saquon, you saw how well Washington ran the ball last week. You saw how well the Raiders ran the ball in week 4. We're going to give you the ball 30 times at least and just let him go nuts.
See, as an Eagles fan, what I want to see is more of what we saw week 1 against the Packers, which was a little bit more under center. We've been back to the shotgun the last couple of weeks. Part of that may have been just because of the injuries to the receiving core. You shrink the playbook a little bit, but now you got the whole group back. Get under center, run the football, do a little more play action. You can still go in the shotgun. You can still do the zone read stuff with Jalen Hurts, which, by the way, for the record, I will say is a positive sign for the way Jalen Hurts is playing. Even though, again, we talk about the turnovers, he is getting back to, Josh, being a threat as a runner, which was a huge part of that 2022 near MVP season.
Right. And I think he's going to see the film of how well Jaden Daniels ran against our defense. I don't know if that means they're going to call more designed QB runs necessarily in this game. I'm not suggesting, nor am I suggesting they should. But I think he'll be less hesitant to escape the pocket if he feels the need to. Because I think that's been a little bit of his issue. That's just from my perspective.
And again, I think he's been getting back to it the last couple of weeks. That Todd Bowles blitz just threw him off, and I think part of it was because he didn't have the receivers.
And that very well could be part of it. But I shouldn't be saying this as a Browns fan, but I hope he gets back to that.
Well, you know what's sad? I was just going to say that. You know what's sad about this game? Eagles fans want to see a blowout, but so do Browns fans. I've never seen a team want their team to lose so bad in week 6 of my life. I have talked to, I swear, 20 Browns fans this week. To a T. Not one of them said, yeah, I think we can right the ship. I still believe in 4. None of that talk. Every single person to a man has said, I hope the Browns get killed. Go Guards. That's what they've said.
Oh, I'm more on the train of go Cavs and go Monsters, but nonetheless. That's partially because I work for the Cavaliers and I work for the Monsters, but...
And you're not as big of a baseball guy, so...
Yes, that part is true. But, yeah, I'm done with Deshaun Watson. D-O-N-E, done. I want Jameis Winston in there on Sunday against Philadelphia. I think that would give us a better chance. I don't think we're going to win, but I just checked the line on ESPN. Philadelphia is I saw it was 9.5.
Did it? It went up then because it was 8 this morning.
Yeah, I just looked. It was 9.5. So think about
Josh.
this. Think about this for a second. They're coming off of their bye week, and the Eagles are over a touchdown favorite.
And by the way, they just got killed by Tampa Bay. And the Browns were only a 3-point dog at Washington. So it shows you how much the public is down on the Browns. I will say this, though. This year, Josh, underdogs are hitting at a historic rate. It is the year of the dogs. For whatever reason, they may not be winning games. A lot of cases they are, but they are covering. Everybody has, said the Giants were going to get killed last week by Seattle. Guess what? They won the game without any of their star players, pulled arguably the upset of the weekend. I think there is a chance here. I'm telling you, I'm not touching this game if I'm a bettor. I think the Browns can cover this spread at least. I think it could be close. I am hoping the Eagles go in there and they get up 14-0. I think the key for your team will be, can they make it a game in the first half?
Yeah. So I'm looking at the spread right now. According to ESPN, Philly is a 9.5 point favorite. The total is 42.5, and Cleveland is a plus 360.
That the total seems low. I would take the over on the total because I think it could be like a 27-20 game, which would put you at 47.
So here's my thing. You and I have really diagnosed, the Eagles' offense a lot in this video, which I appreciate. Um, that's why I like to keep these very conversational rather than interviewee, because I like to see where the conversation really goes. And I look at your offense, and I look at the fact that we gave up 33 against Dallas. I know that wasn't necessarily because of Dallas's defense, but still, we gave up 33 there. We gave up 20 against the Raiders, 34 against the Commanders last week. So 4 of our first 5 opponents this season have put up at least 20 points.
And the Browns scored 20 points in a game this year.
Sorry, your screen froze. Say that one more time.
The Browns have not scored 20 points in a game this year.
Correct. Because they scored, what was it, 17 in week 1. I forget. They won week 2, but I forget the final score there.
I think it was 19. I think they got to 19.
Something, or it might have been 18. Either way, it was in that ballpark. In week 3, they only got 16, and in last week, they got 13. So,
which again, to me, unless Vegas thinks that the Browns defense can be able to hold Philadelphia down, I think that, either the Browns are going to get shut out or the over is going to hit on that point total.
But I look at it and I'm like, I understand why Philly is a 9.5 point favorite. You're coming off of your bye, and the Browns offense has been basically non-existent for the most part. And the defense is like a beaver dam that's about to break.
And by the way, Carolina is only a 6.5 point dog at home to Atlanta. So that's telling you Vegas thinks that the Browns are worse than the Panthers.
That's saying something considering the Panthers situation with Bryce Young. And
by the way, they were only 4.5 point dogs to Chicago. The Giants have missing out their people were 6.5 point dogs in Seattle. 9.5. The only other spread we've seen that large this year was New England against San Francisco, and that was 10.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the line reaches 10 for this game. It really would not surprise me at all.
I mean, that's telling you basically that the Sharks, which what they call the sharp bettors, the wise guys that bet for a living, thinks the Browns are the worst team in the National Football League.
Trust me, I'm already gearing up for the Browns to draft a quarterback in next year's draft.
Well, here's the thing, though. Is he going to play next year? Because are you going to, $127 million, either get cut or sit on your bench?
That's the problem, is if we cut him, we're going to have a tremendous amount of dead cap, either before the June 1st deadline, I think it is, or after. I think it's June 1st, where it's like 87 in terms of the dead cap, and it goes up to like 170 past June 1st. I think that's the date. I'm not 100% sure.
We might have had this conversation on like a pre-show before championship rings, but I don't remember if we have. I told you, why did the Browns decide to put Deshaun Watson's salary cap into a signing bonus, which for those of you that don't know is a cap money thing. You can kick the can down the road, what the Saints have been doing for years with their salary cap. Why do they do it to open up nearly $70 million in cap room and not use it? I speculated it was for Ayuk, and then they didn't get the deal done. But other than that, I don't know why the Browns have so much salary cap space and they're not using it, and they have put themselves in an uncuttable situation with Deshaun Watson. Because if you would have not put the salary cap bonus, if you would have just gave Watson, his $45 million in cap dollars, whatever it would be, the dead cut money would be about $50 million, and you could move on from him the way Denver has done with Russell Wilson.
Yeah, because Denver basically said, we'll pay you to not play here.
And by the way, they have a winning record with Bo Nix, who has gotten better each and every week.
Yes. By the way, I liked that he got in Sean Payton's face last week.
Oh, Drew Brees was on the herd yesterday with Colin Cowherd. He loved it. He said that's what Sean Payton loves. He said that he did it a couple times with Sean. He said it looked just like him and Sean.
Yeah, I think Bo Nix is starting to become that next Drew Brees for Sean Payton.
I did I not say right out of the draft? I saw it immediately.
That's part of the reason why. I know it surprised you, but that's part of the reason why I picked the Broncos to steal a wild card spot on our NFL prediction episode of Championship Rings.
You did, and you know what? I'll tell you a team that's not making the playoffs this year. It's the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah. It's funny. I picked the Browns to make the playoffs on our episode, and then later I took on my own channel, I took them out and put the Jaguars in.
I think I convinced you though. I remember I predicted the Browns to finish last place in the division, and I think you paused, you thought about it, and you said, "You know what? I think you're right."
No, I think I had Pittsburgh. I had the Browns finishing third.
You had them finishing second. You had Cincinnati in last place.
That's right. Yeah.
Which technically right now they are, but I think that they're going to right the ship. But we're not going to get into that right now. It's Browns Eagles.
Yes. We're just about in an hour, so do you have anything else for this or no?
I think it's going to come down to, again, I think the defense side of the ball. What I don't think a lot of people are talking about, Josh, for the Browns, they're not tackling. Their defense is not as good as people think it is. I know they were good at home last year, but when you have that start of a difference between home and road splits, you know what that tells me? You're not that good of a defense.
Yeah. And so let me ask you this. Is that a reflection of Jim Schwartz, or is that a reflection of the players or is that a reflection of the players on the field?
I think it's a combination of both. I think they have the players. I think they have the scheme. They're just not executing it. Again, Myles Garrett needs to play up to his potential. But don't forget, Jim Schwartz knows this Philadelphia crowd. He was not there, or he was there Jalen Hurts' rookie year. He got to see a little bit of Jalen Hurts. Obviously, he's transformed since then. So there's some familiarity with some players in the Eagles, but not a ton. So that's going to be interesting, though, with Schwartz going back to Philly. That's an aspect we did not hit on.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that. I don't think he's going to get like a video tribute or anything.
No, but I mean, he was responsible. He was the defensive coordinator for winning a Super Bowl. So they may acknowledge him.
They might. I mean, he can look up at the Super Bowl banner and be like, I remember that team.
Okay, so we talked about a little bit of an Eagles dysfunction. Can I give you a little story real quick?
Go ahead.
Let me see. It's all the way over there on the other side of me, so I'm not going to grab it. But when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, Doug Peterson wrote a book. It's called Fearless. And in that book, he talks about how, do you remember at the end of the 2016 season? This was the year before Philadelphia went to the Super Bowl. Remember they started off 3-0. Carson Wentz was the talk of the town, and they finished 7-9.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was Carson Wentz's rookie year, right?
Correct. Do you want to know something that I don't think a lot of people know?
Sure.
At the end of that year, during you know how every team at the end of the year does their exit interviews with the coaches?
Yes.
Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie used that exit interview with Jim Schwartz because they were going to fire Doug Peterson and make Jim Schwartz the head coach. And Jim Schwartz ran down to Doug Peterson's office, told him what they did, told ownership Doug Peterson's a great coach and that he didn't want the job. And they stuck with Doug, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and you guys won the Super Bowl. Okay, let me ask you this. Was it the right decision, looking back, to fire Doug Peterson?
Well, yes. At the time, I was pissed off. I was more pissed off than I think anything in my entire life. I love Doug Peterson. You could build a statue for Doug Peterson. I don't care what he does the rest of his career. He's eating free in Philadelphia for the rest of his life. Doug Peterson will be an Eagle in my heart forever. But clearly, it was time to get a new voice. And I like Nick Sirianni. I liked him when we hired him. Yes, he's a little bit unconventional, but you know what? You're not a terrible coach if you get a team to a Super Bowl. I'm sorry. I just believe that in my heart. Nick Sirianni is a good football coach. I don't know what's gone wrong here. Again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they do need a new shape or whatever. I just think this football team's way too talented, man. I think we got a real shot. I don't want to waste this year. I don't want to blow everything up. Once you fire Sirianni, you're basically saying the season's over to me.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel with Kevin Stefanski, even though like we've talked about
No,
it.
it's a good point. I mean, we'll get into it on Tuesday with championship rings. Is the Jets season over? I mean, seriously, do you know an interim head coach has never made the playoffs outside of Rich Bisaccia? And Gruden was not fired because the team was bad. Gruden was fired because of emails or whatever.
Yeah. And well, Antonio Pierce, he didn't get the Raiders to the playoffs as the interim coach, but at least he righted that ship after a mess with Josh McDaniels.
He did, but most interim coaches do. You know, most interim coaches, you play well the first week. If the Browns were to fire Stefanski, Philly were to fire Sirianni, first couple of weeks they play well, and then they sort of settle in, and the interim head coach becomes the substitute teacher, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that with the Chicago White Sox and Grady Sizemore.
I mean,
Oh,
it's the same conversation they're having in Chicago about Eberflus. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. Not to take away from Eagles Browns, I think it is going to be a fascinating game for entertainment purposes for everybody. I hope it's a good game. I know you'll probably be texting me. I probably won't be responding till after the game because I typically don't look at my phone till after the game. I like to get all the juju out and gather my own thoughts during the game. But it only happens once every 4 years, usually. Maybe with the new NFL schedules, there's a chance they play in a couple years. But this matchup is a very rare one.
yes. Um, so I appreciate you coming in. I know we had a few technical issues, but we got those worked out. If I had to give a score prediction, considering we got blown out by Jaden Daniels and the Commanders 34-13, I see no reason why Jalen Hurts and the Eagles offensively can't do the same type of thing. I'll even say it's a little bit worse. 37-10.
Wow. How about this? 31-17.
So you got the Eagles winning in blowout fashion also.
By 14, again, do the Browns get a backdoor touchdown and cover potentially? I don't know. We got to see how the first quarter goes. If the Browns can stay in it early, it will be close to the end.
By the way, unlike in 2020 where the Browns swept the NFC East, if they lose this game, then they get swept by the NFC East because they lost to the Cowboys, they lost to the Giants, they lost to the Commanders. Now they're playing the Eagles.
And Cincinnati on deck.
Yep. So
and Philly's got at the Giants, which we always do well against the Giants. I'm nervous about that MetLife turf, but we'll see. I don't know. Giants got Cincinnati this week, so
yep.
How interesting is that, by the way? The two teams that both our teams play next play each other this week.
Yes. Which that game should not be on Sunday Night Football. I'm sorry. I'd much rather watch Jaden Daniels against Lamar Jackson. But
that's another NFC East, AFC North matchup this week. So kind of weird scheduling from the NFL. I'm rooting for the Ravens and Bengals. You're rooting for the Commanders and Giants.
Yes. And no, the Cowboys and Steelers played the last week. Never mind.
Oh my God, that game was on till 1:00 in the morning. I was falling asleep watching Justin Field try to operate an offense. My God, help me.
Okay. We'll be back though on Tuesday with championship rings. I couldn't do it this week because I was working the Cavs preseason game against the Chicago Bulls. But Brandon, I appreciate you coming in and helping me achieve my goal.
Fly, Eagles, fly on the road to victory. Fight,
Hey,
fight, fight.
hey, even though we're not making a bet about this game, I'll tell you what. When the Eagles win this game, I'll do that. I don't know the full fight song, but I'll try and learn as much of it as I can, and I'll do it for you maybe on Tuesday.
You gotta do a hit 'em low, hit 'em high, like a Jey Uso yeet.
Okay, so when the Eagles win, I'll try and do the fly Eagles fly. Not all of it. I'll as much as I can. Is that all right?
Sounds good, buddy. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I'm so glad to be a part of the Sports Room Talk Show.
Yes.